Well, good morning on this Thursday, and thanks for watching us here for Live Impact News. My name is Eugene Daniel, and you are on 13 News Now Plus. We are now officially over the government shutdown. The president did sign in that spending bill into law late last night, ending a historic shutdown in America. 43 days is how long it went between Democrats and Republicans not being able to reach a deal. On the 43rd day, we see that signed. It is still a temporary measure. We'll get into that a little bit later. But first, we're going to start with a new proposal that is coming out of the city of Norfolk with its school board. School board members have proposed more than 700% increase in their own pay. We have right now the talk about that and why they could potentially be placing this on the table. We have Norfolk City Councilman Carlos Clanton, who was formerly, prior to his current role, a school board member in the city of Norfolk, and we appreciate him for joining us this morning to talk about this conversation that has a lot of people talking since last night. So, Carlos, can you hear us? Good morning. Okay, doesn't quite seem. I know that he's in there because I can see him. Doesn't quite seem that we can get him in at the moment. I don't think he can hear. Let me go ahead and text him too. And while we get that situated, what I'll go ahead and do is talk a little bit about this at the moment. And so Norfolk School Board agenda last night, they put forward this proposal and what each board member's salary would go from roughly $3,000 a year to $25,000 a year starting in 2027. The board chair's salary will go from $5,100 to $27,000 a year. And so a major increase in that. It's contingent, though, upon the approval of the school board's annual budget, which goes through Norfolk City Council, which is a part of the reason why we have Carlos in with us here today to talk about that. We're just getting that situated at the moment. That resolution, though, comes right after the Norfolk School Board recently approved that plan to close 9 schools between now and 2033. 4 additional schools will be repurposed, and there will be more that will be rebuilt and renovated according to that plan, which has taken up a lot of conversation within the city of Norfolk. A lot of parents and families talking about that plan to consolidate because the city of Norfolk, the city council, told the school board that they needed to go through a plan that would meet dropping enrollment numbers and a thinning of funds that comes along with that. And so, of course, when you're looking into a conversation where school board members are now looking at the idea of a significant pay increase, there are certainly questions that come along with that. Let's see if we can try one more time and see if Carlos can hear us at the moment. Carlos, if you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear us on the other side. All right, so we got the thumbs up. Let's go ahead and bring him in at this moment. We appreciate him. This is Carlos Clanton, who is a Norfolk City Councilman, but again, spent many years as a school board member in Norfolk to talk about this. And Carlos, I appreciate your time. You know, when people hear that number, 3,000 to 25,000 for an elected official, obviously it raises some questions, but they have a reason that they say because of the amount of work that they do. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, Eugene, that's a loaded question. I, I will say that the $3,000, the figure that we hear, is the appointed stipend that an individual. When I came on the school board in 2018, it was the second time that residents were voting for an elected school board. The first time was in 2016 after a referendum was put before the citizens to say that they want an elected school board. And so individuals will receive a $3,000 stipend, and that stipend is used for like reimbursement for your gas, going to meetings, your time, and so forth there. While we were on the school board, there was discussion about increasing that because the General Assembly had given the authority for the localities to be able to increase their stipend. And so in that challenge with that, we had a couple of things, and I have to set that scenario up. is that COVID happened. We also were dealing with compression with our teachers and staff members as far as their pay. And so, even though this was something that members of the school board were saying, hey, we need to increase this, it was something that was delayed. Now, the amount for which that the it's being proposed was not a consideration when I was on the school board. We can look at a sister city right next door in Portsmouth who had increased their salary, and I think it's somewhere around $14,000 to $15,000, but not a significant jump to almost $25,000 there. And I guess from what I also read, it's saying that they wanted to be in comparison to the same amount that the council was receiving. And I will be frank in saying that now serving as a council member compared to serving as a school board member, that really is no comparison in the work. Not saying that any work is less or in that respect are not vitally important, but council members, we are pulled and the requirements to being a lot of things is totally different from that of a school board member. And I think that individuals should question about that great of a significant increase. But I think that they do need to be able to increase but I think that that number needs to be considered in right sizing that to make it more palatable.
And listening to you say that, Carlos, it sounds like, again, you in your experience, the work that is put in that role. And the school board chair, she actually talked about that, about the amount of work that they're putting in. And also, she believes that if you were to increase the amount in which they could receive, it would also garner more participation, people wanting to serve in that space. Is that something, too, in your conversations that you've had currently and in the past, that people have said, you know what, I think I would do very well in this, but there's just not enough in it financially for me to be able to do it? Is that something that has come up amongst you and your colleagues?
Yeah, I would say that yes, no, that is an argument that's been made in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Unless you're a constitutional officer, all of us are part-time. And I often joke and say that this is a full-time, part-time job because you really do, in order to be effective in your work, you have to go above and beyond and really put in more time than what's on paper required to be able to meet the needs of those that you're representing. I would say that the argument was made that, if we were able to increase, then those who are stepping away from their regular jobs would be able to supplement, so they would be able to supplement that, so they would be able to do that. Because in many respects, we have individuals, unless you have a certain job, unless you've got that freedom and flexibility, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're really your own boss, or someone who just doesn't work at all, it's very challenging to be able to serve. And so, yeah, there could be an argument to say that if you do increase this, it would be able to offer and remove a barrier and open up to some other individuals. But again, this is just to supplement something in the respect that you're losing in the time that you're giving, and not meant to be a full-time salary or something in the respect to compensate somebody. It's really to replace the time that you're losing for which you're giving to service.
Carlos, we just talked about and went through the whole consolidation plan that obviously a lot of people had thoughts and feelings about, that city council said that the school board needed to do. And we had you on and talked about that several weeks ago when that finally was kind of pushed through. You can imagine there might be people in the community who think, hey, you just made a decision, the school board just made a decision that they needed to close, repurpose, consolidate schools in part because of enrollment and money. But now we're talking about significantly increasing the pay for school board members. How do you reconcile that for those who may have questions and or concerns about the conversation?
Yeah, I look at that. Again, the school consolidation and closure request was nothing new. When I served on the school board as a member and as vice chair and chairman, this was something that was consistently sent to us to saying, hey, we're seeing this steady decline in enrollment. We need to start looking at school closures and consolidation. Again, COVID disrupted a lot of things and put stuff on the back burner. I will also say that the optics and the timing, in order to increase your pay, you are required to do a vote before an election. And so right now, and there's a reason for that, that the reason why the General Assembly has stated that you have to do that, so that if you increase your pay, then the voters get a chance to make that determination if that was a wise decision, choice, or decision, and they get to do that through the election box. So the timing and the optics of it, like I said, a more measured increase. I support the school board giving themselves an increase, but it needs to be measured. I do not think that saying that we want the same amount that the city council is receiving is palatable. I've also stated that we also have boards and commissions such as the Planning Commission, the Economic Development Commission, who also receive stipends. Those are appointed. There's something different. Of course, this is an elected school board now, but they're meeting almost weekly. And so again, I just think that it needs to be measured. Look at what our other school divisions are doing, and as far as the pricing that the amount that they're saying they're going to give themselves.
And then my last question to you, Carlos, again, thank you for your time this morning. I know you have to head on out here soon. Can you talk a little bit about how the process will work? Obviously, you have the school board that says they're going to take this up within the next month or so to look at this proposal. But then ultimately, in order for money to get through the school board, they set their budget, but the city council has to approve it. Is this something that you all would take into consideration, look at a little bit closely before signing off on whether or not this money would go through for the 2027 school year?
Like I said, this is really incumbent upon the school board to make their case before the parents, teachers, and the electorate of Norfolk. And that's why they're having their public hearing. They'll approve their budget. Like you stated, that budget will then come to council. I don't speak for all my colleagues on council. We're all of us at 7 council members and the mayor, and we all have our own individual vote. I have a unique position in the respect that I'm a former school board member. So is Courtney Doyle. She's a former school board member, and Tommy Smeagol is a principal within the school division. And Mamie Johnson is a former educator and as well. I think that each person will look at it on its merit, and will make their own decision. For me, I think I'm pretty clear in the respect. I believe in some type of increase, and I hope that the school board will look at the amount that they're requesting. But I do not think that I would approve $25,000 or, for council members, for school board members, and then a separate amount for the chair. I think that they need to look at what other school divisions are doing in the area, specifically Portsmouth, which is a very similar in demographic and size there, and to look at that before they make that big jump. But everybody will make their own decision.
They certainly will. Again, thank you so much for the time. I know there's a lot of people who are going to be asking more questions, but again, you provide a very unique perspective, as you said, some of your other colleagues on city council who have been in it, who have been in that role, and obviously can look at it a little bit differently. So we appreciate it. Carlos Clayton with Norfolk City Council. Thank you. We'll be talking to you soon.
Hey, not a problem. Have a great one.
All right, you too. Have a good morning. So certainly appreciate him coming on. Again, there's a lot of people who were just having questions about this in the morning after that meeting last night. I did want to just really quickly see if we can play the soundbite from the school board chair. This is what she told our reporters last night. That kind of goes along with what you heard from Carlos there just a moment ago about some of the things that the work that they have to do when it comes to matching the compensation.
Our stipends were $3,000 a year and $5,100 for the chair. We also looked at what city council was being compensated at, and our resolution brings us up to be in line with city council.
So there you have it. You can hear from her, similar again to what you just heard there, right? And so we'll see where that goes. The next step for that will come in December, where they will kind of reconsider what could happen with that vote. That will be the next meeting that they'll take, the business meeting, in which they could be taking a vote in that. Again, the salary increase will go into effect on January 1st of 2027. Okay, so a lot of things, again, kind of to talk about here today. I do want to just real briefly, if we can head over to some protests that are taking place at the moment with maybe a lot of people's favorite coffee spot. Starbucks employees are again this morning on a strike. This is about 65 stores across the country where they are currently on strike. And this is, they say, because of a lack of progress in negotiations with the company, labor negotiations. Right now, that strike you can see going on at the moment, with several people in Philadelphia voicing their concerns right now. And so it was originally intended to disrupt Starbucks Red Cup Day, which is typically one of the busiest days of the year. And so this is strategic. It's not the first time that we have seen Starbucks employees go on strike. Some of the cities that this is currently taking place in, it could be yours if you're following in on this stream from somewhere outside of Hampton Roads, Virginia. You have New York, Philly, what you're looking at right there, Minneapolis, San Diego, St. Louis, Dallas, Columbus, Ohio, and of course in the home city of Starbucks being in Seattle. This is the beginning of that. At the moment, it's not clear how long they will strike. When I say how long, I mean how many days they plan to do that, or if there will be more stores in which the employees and the workers plan to join in this particular fight. But when you think about Starbucks, I mean, it has so many stores across the country, 10,000 company-owned stores in the U.S. At the moment. And so we're looking again at around 65 stores in which workers today plan to strike, similar to what you're seeing right there in Philadelphia. I wonder if we can hear them too. I'm going to see if I can play the audio. That is on VMix A, right? So let me see if we can hear them just a little bit outside.
Shut it down! Shut it down!
So you can listen to them there, right? I'll go ahead and mute them for right now. They are definitely in number outside, and here's what they say that they're fighting for. They're fighting for better hours and improved staffing in their stores. They say that long customer wait times are routine. They also want higher pay. Okay, they want higher pay, and say that some of the executives are making millions of dollars, and they feel as though that the pay can be more equitable for the people who work in Starbucks across the country. And so you can hear them there. You can see their signs. They are hoping to get some kind of leeway for employee rights as we look at this protest that just kicked off today, or this strike that just kicked off today, again, with no exact clear time that it will end in sight. So just wanted to bring that up and show it to you as it was happening in real time. Okay, so let's talk about the big news that took place overnight, and this is the government shutdown, in which we know now the historic shutdown has ended. President Trump signed a bill that was passed by the House and the Senate late last night, ending the historic 43-day shutdown, well over the 35-day previous record, also under a Trump administration, but his former Trump administration. The things that were in this bill, it funds the government through January, funds SNAP, and other departments like the VA through September. It reinstates federal employees fired during the shutdown, and it guarantees back pay for furloughed workers. A lot of those workers returning to work this morning, returning today, after the federal government gave notice for them to come back to their jobs overnight. The bill, though, does not include those tax credits extensions under the Affordable Care Act, which was the main thing that Democrats continued to say throughout this entire exchange, that kept them at an impasse. It does not include that. It does include what they say is a promise to vote on it within the coming weeks. We will see how that goes here soon, but it has gotten mixed reactions from people who were supporting Democrats in that lane, who some are saying, even within the party, you had many who did not go with that vote in the Senate. And there were 8 that broke with their ranks, including here in Virginia, Senator Tim Kaine, that then got it to the House. That House measure passed 222 to 209, with several Democrats and some Republicans voting against that measure also. But it did pass, and the president has signed it, and now the government is back open. I want to do this here real quick, and now I'll just go ahead and talk with you at this point in scan. Let's pull up we have a layout of how people voted in a layout of how people voted within the House here in Canva. So it's probably going to be in one of the others. If you go to, there we go. Let's go ahead and pull this up real quick so we can show people here within the Hampton Roads area how those votes went through, and some of the things in which they said also. Again, that vote went by 222 to 209 in the House yesterday, ending the government shutdown. And here is how the vote went down. Let's go to the next one there. Here are some of the votes that took place. We have Representative Rob Whitman, who represents the 1st Congressional District here in Virginia. That's part of James City County, York County, some other areas. He voted yes in support. You can see there he says that he wanted to reopen the government, reinstate stability. He says the American people deserve a government that works for them and does not come to a complete halt in pursuit of political gains. Next up, we have Representative Bobby Scott, the Democrat from the 3rd Congressional District. It covers much of Hampton Roads as well. He did not vote for this bill. He says it includes millions of dollars in payouts to several Republican senators, is what she says. He also talked about how this went against pushing for extensions for health care coverage in America. And so he was a no on that. We had him on the show several weeks ago as well, talking about his thought process. Let's go to the next one here. We have Representative Jen Kiggins, the Republican representing the 2nd Congressional District out of Virginia Beach. And she was a yes vote to open the government, saying that she was proud to vote for this package. The legislation ends the shutdown, ensures our troops and federal workers are paid, and invest in the people and projects that keep our nation strong. We also had the Congresswoman on our broadcast here from 2 until 4 yesterday, within that window, talking about her thoughts on that. And so we also have Democrat Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, who voted against the measure. You can see her comments there, calling it a piecemeal package that kicks down the road until January for most federal families. We can go back there real quick. As you can see, she says there that it fails to prevent millions of Americans who purchase insurance through the Affordable Care Act from seeing their premiums spike in January. Again, those premiums expire December 31st, which is what many of the Democrats have been talking about this entire time. Let's go to the next one here. And this is Democrat Representative Don Davis in North Carolina, but that's in our market here for those who are unfamiliar with Hampton Roads in Northeast North Carolina. And he actually voted in favor. He said the bill includes provisions that attack the civil rights and liberties of service members and military families, including eliminating any Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And so you have there the votes that took place in our area with our viewing area. So we wanted to make sure that we showed those at the moment. So again, a big time and step now that the government is back open. But one thing that I did want to point out, I reached out to an economic expert as well. Just wanted to get some insight now that we know that federal workers will get their back pay for those who were furloughed, and we know people will be getting their jobs back in this exchange as well. We know the government is now officially back open. We still have to get that money to those individuals who have for the last 6 or 7 weeks gone without pay. And that's not just impacting the federal employees, it's impacting contractors, it's impacted the establishments in which they eat, in which they shop. And some of the things that I wanted to ask is, so how does this translate, over the next few weeks? Are there any kind of things that we could potentially still see as we're trying to get things ramped up? And here are some of the key issues they said to focus on. He says, how quick will the Fed pay back workers who are returning to work, right? Getting those furloughed workers their money back. That will be a big thing to focus on. Also, how quickly will those who are laid off for like defense contract workers, how quickly can they get back to work for those who were not working? Another thing to look at is how quickly can those who were mentioned in those two categories pay any outstanding debt that may have been due during the government's closure. We're talking rent, mortgages, credit cards. There may have been people who were facing some form of an eviction because of not being able to pay that particular month, or other debts that they had to pay. How quickly can all of that be paid off in outstanding debt, right? So getting those paychecks together is going to be a very crucial portion for a lot of people. And the timing is interesting because it also comes as a new survey came out just this week from the Bank of America Institute that says 1 in 4 U.S. households are living paycheck to paycheck in today's economy. So when you factor all of that for a lot of the federal employees who have not been getting paid and the everyday expenses that they still have, these are all things that have to be considered, even though we are at this point officially out of this government shutdown, that now it's a temporary spending measure has been placed into law. So interesting things to kind of consider. We're going to keep trying to get some economists and experts to get onto the show. Later on in this stream, we'll actually do a phoner with the mayor of a local city who had written during this government shutdown pleading for it to end, saying that it was impacting his constituents. So we will have, at least we plan to have, Mayor Bobby Dyer around 11:15 to talk about that. And so we are looking forward to hearing what he had to say. Okay, so right now we're going to pivot one more time, and we're going to get back to that when we bring in the mayor, of course. But I want to pivot now to North Carolina just for a few moments. If you recall, several months ago, there was a brutal attack on board a transit route there in Charlotte, North Carolina, where a Ukrainian refugee was stabbed to death by a man who had documented criminal and mental health issues. Well, today there is a committee in the North Carolina House that is looking at some of the ways in which maybe this could have been spotted ahead of time, and maybe people who have similar issues with mental health, etc., can they be admitted? And then how can they get the help and support that they need? I just want to listen in right now. There's an expert speaking in front of this committee. Let's see what we can glean and hear while we kind of catch our breath on this end for a few moments.
Unless you get treatment, you're going to deteriorate to the point of becoming dangerous. And if you're already dangerous, it's inpatient commitment, the recommendation. But if you're not, do we just release? Or are there some information that says this person still needs to receive sort of monitored treatment? And if you can determine that there's an outpatient provider or family friends or others that can provide that, this is according to the criteria, that they can, if you determine they can survive safely in the community with community treatment, then that can be recommended. But some states, they would say, so here when the court orders outpatient commitment, then that's largely the end of the court involvement. But in some states, there might be, you could write in, and some have, where during the term of commitment, they have to come back to court for some court monitoring or oversight or involvement to see how things are going. Or there could be other things written in to make it more than just, okay, you're ordered to commitment, go to treatment, go get commitment. I mean, you could add more teeth to it if you wanted to.
Just one more, Mr. Chair.
Quickly,
It will be, I'm sorry. This is broad, so you don't have to, you could probably answer for an hour, but I don't think the chair would appreciate that. Why don't we have long-term commitment anymore? To me, I hear, and I've said this, some of my colleagues have heard this, it's not humane to put somebody in a long-term commitment is kind of what we hear. And then I argue, well, then is it humane to put someone with Alzheimer's in a locked building and to keep them locked up? Why don't these folks that go in, they get their medication right, everything's cool, they go back to the community, there's no way to check on them, they go downhill, they start hurting people, we pick them up again, and it's over and over and over again. Why, instead of letting these people sleep under cardboard boxes on the streets, why can't we put them in long-term commitment if they need it?
Ms. Botts, I'm sure you've got a short answer for this.
There's so much I could say to that. One is that the U.S. Supreme Court said back in 1975, you cannot hold someone, a mentally ill person, indefinitely in a locked institution. They have to be dangerous to themselves or others. Now, there could be a question. Now, the states get to write their definitions of dangerousness, okay, and they can vary. And you raise the question, so that's part of the answer. You can't hold them indefinitely unless they're considered dangerous. Okay. However, whether or not those definitions are being appropriately applied, and whether or not I think there would be room for a little longer commitment, but not indefinitely. It depends on the clinicians applying the definitions, many factors, but the basic one is that Supreme Court decision.
Representative Brown, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. First, I just want to say I appreciate the presentation today. It was a wealth of information. It's definitely needed for us. One thing you've mentioned a couple of times is the lack of space, capacity that we have, and also a lack of providers that we have. When we're looking at that first examination to make that initial determination on the IVC process, has there been any thought to with the growing push for telehealth, to have someone who is able to, if there's not a provider available in County X, you have somebody here in Raleigh or somewhere that's able to make this determination virtually without watering down the process at all?
That's currently provided for in the law. The first exam can be done through telehealth by a clinician and commitment examiners that's somewhere geographically other than where the respondent is. That was added to the law in the last few years. So that can be done.
So how often is that done? I know a lot of counties have been struggling with finding providers, and that's a big crisis we're going through, is getting folks to actually do this work. So is that actually being utilized now, or?
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that. How much is telehealth used in comparison to in-person commitment exams? I do not know. And maybe the Department of Health and Human Services has some information on that.
Representative Moore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Botts, very much for this. Just a quick thing. I think we're all concerned about this never-ending loop of the 7-day commitments and then a new petition and a new order. Is there a limit on it, or it's just you keep going until you find that facility and you keep having to go through this 7-day cycle?
There's not a limit on it written into statutory law, so that there could be many. Now, this doesn't happen often, but I have heard of cases that go weeks. I know of a few cases that have gone 7 weeks. So what's 7 times 7? 49, I think. I'm just a lawyer, not a mathematician.
Okay. Well, and following up to that, they don't have the right to an attorney during this time.
That's correct. There is no right to an attorney during that time. So you could have someone held at the hospital emergency department, and by the way, they don't like it because They're not a treatment facility for a mental illness. They're for emergencies, right? But you could have someone held for days, weeks, no hearing, no attorney, and they could be held longer than if they'd gone to the 24-hour facility and received a hearing and the court-ordered commitment.
And one more follow-up. Do we keep any data on this? How long people are being held and the continuation of the hearings? Do you know, is this being tracked statewide by DHHS or anyone?
Yeah, whenever, again, someone asks me about data, I get uncomfortable and embarrassed because I want to have some information for you. I would like to have that information. You should have that information. There's not a lot of good information out there. Now, the department has some information. Perhaps that question's best directed to the department. I've talked to the hospital association. They don't have that data. I was told contact different hospitals. So one thing to consider, I mean, you're not going to get good data unless you require it legislatively. That's what I can tell you, because it just will not be collected in any systematic aggregated form. There is some data, but not a lot.
Thank you.
Editorial comment from the chair. If we had a decent longitudinal data system in this state, we would have this sort of information about these problems as well as others. Representative Lambeth, you're recognized.
This is a question that probably can be put together with some information from the staff, so we don't have to take the time to answer it. But I'm interested in knowing more about the magistrates in terms of who can be a magistrate, what's the training, who do they actually work for, and who evaluates them, and then what's the workload, the vacancy. Is it a difficult to fill position? And that's probably something that I think staff could put together for us and just share that with us. The other thing I would point out is HHS does have a very comprehensive mental health reform plan. You may remember that this General Assembly approved $835 million for a variety of purposes, opening more beds, training more staff. I assume at some point you'll have them come and talk about what their current status is and the current plans for that rollout.
Representative Charles Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Botts. I've got a couple of questions, and they're pretty specific, so I don't think the answer will be terribly involved. You mentioned that the petition that initiates the civil process can be based on hearsay. And if I'm remembering correctly, when you get to the district court hearing, the provider or the clinician, there is a hearsay exception allowing that person to testify to the content of the petition if it was used in their determination of a medical diagnosis. And so I'm just curious if that's ever been challenged by a respondent, if, in this sense, they're not able to examine or cross-examine or question the person who initiated this process, and maybe on due process grounds, I suppose, with not just the petition being able to be based on hearsay, but then the clinician subsequently being able to testify to that information in a hearsay exception.
Yeah, I don't have a good, that's a great question, and I would need to go back and look at that and get an answer to you on that.
And then my other question deals with when the petition or the affidavit is started by a clinician. Do you have issues with the clinicians stating legal conclusions? Is that ever an issue with the affidavits? I suppose it'd be hard for a clinician to really know the person, or at least I suppose their interactions are limited to a clinical setting. Like they're seeing them and in their petitions, you state facts that would lead a magistrate to conclude that there's a reasonable likelihood this person is mentally ill or a danger to themselves or others. Is there a way, or does the state or educate clinicians that when they're doing this, they need to state facts in the affidavit and not state, John Doe is mentally ill and a danger to himself, like not stating the conclusion in the affidavit? This
is an ongoing issue I face in my training, in my education for magistrates and clinicians. The law requires, although they're required to state their belief, the examiner, whether or not the commitment.
We're going to continue to follow that. We'll come back into it in just a moment. But right now, I wanted to head to New York, Brooklyn, in fact, where new mayor-elect Mamdani is giving his plans for universal child care in the city. So let's take a listen to his plans just after he's been newly elected to that role as mayor of the city.
Mayor-elect Mike from Chalk Beat.
Hey Mike, how's it going?
Good. I'm wondering what lessons you're drawing from the rollout of universal pre-K as you think about your own universal campaign. Obviously, it was a huge policy achievement, happened very quickly, helped a lot of people, but I've also spoken to a lot of providers, some of whom have spoken to you about the fact that it disrupted things for them. It drew away teachers, it drew away students, some of them had to close down. So how are you kind of thinking about what lessons to take from that as you roll out your own program?
I think there is a critical need to ensure that the childcare we're providing is high quality. And that is something that I've learned mostly in the conversations that I've been having with childcare providers themselves, the importance of that being foregrounded in what we're creating. I think that UPK provides a model for how city government can meet the needs that would otherwise be pushing New Yorkers out of these 5 boroughs. And I'm also looking to learn from the lessons of implementation and ensure that we are building on that we are also not seeing this as an opportunity to throw everything out that came before us, but instead an opportunity for us to build on that which has come before and deliver childcare to those who currently are being pushed out of it.
Yeah,
Sir, I realize that it's early. How do you envision the rollout of all of this? Would you be rolling it out in phases? And what is the overall timeline? When can you, say to New Yorkers, this is our vision realized?
I view the time that I will be the mayor as the time that we have to implement the policies that we ran on. Those are policies that I fully intend to fulfill, and we intend to fulfill them because the absence of them has been costing New Yorkers an immense amount of money. In a single year, it was measured that our economy paid the cost of about $23 billion due to the absence of affordable childcare. On the question of timeline, on the question of phases, these are the conversations we are having over the course of this transition. This is what animates so many of the questions of who we hire and how we create our city hall, because what we want to do is be clear and transparent with New Yorkers, and as soon as we have more information to share on that, we'll be sure to do so.
Are you talking about 1 term or 2 terms when you talk about your time in office?
Maximum 2 terms.
Can you talk a little bit about the latest conversations you've had with the governor about implementing universal child care? I know that you guys have spoken about working on it together. Like, what's sort of your game plan in Albany next year? Can you shed some light on that?
What I've appreciated is that Governor Hochul and I share a commitment to universal child care. It's a commitment that recognizes the fact that the absence of it is not only one that is affecting families, it's also affecting providers and it's affecting staff. And we've heard the fact that while so much of this conversation rightfully centers on the questions of funding, there's also a number of issues around policy, around structure, around RFPs, and just hearing earlier today that the city has oftentimes made it harder. Whereas today we have 2 classrooms that are empty that used to be providing infant care in this very facility. And we know that the lack of flexibility sometimes between school day and extended care has also meant that there are families that are unable to get the care that they need. And in the conversations I've had with the governor, it has been about fulfilling the vision of universal childcare and ensuring that government becomes a partner as opposed to a burden or an obstacle. And that's something that we are going to be spelling out in the weeks and the months to come.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Mamdani. How are you doing? We know that this universal child care is the biggest area of alignment that both you and the governor have talked about. To be frank, is this how you get the millionaire's tax or the corporate tax through? You put it in this bucket where there is this universal alignment. So is that how you get that through? And then also, just because there's a hearing today, what do you think about the idea of separating EMTs from firefighters?
One at a time. The universal child care is something that we've seen in other cities. In Montreal, for example, rather in Quebec, we saw the implementation of universal child care also led to a 10-to-1 economic return. This is something that We care about it on a moral level, we care about it on a political level, but also on an economic level. And I've put forward two proposals that I think are the most straightforward and direct ways to raise the revenue for this program, as well as our economic agenda, and to start Trump-proofing our city, increasing personal income taxes on the top 1% by 2%, increasing the state's top corporate tax rate to match that of New Jersey. I've also said that the most important thing is not how we fund it, but that we fund it. I think these are the most direct ways to do so. But any funding stream that would fund these programs, that is one that we would welcome, because the most important thing at the end of the day is that someone can raise their family in this city and that we make it easier for them to do so.
Isn't using this shared goal the easiest, most straightforward way to envision both your tax plan and your universal child care plan, this area of alignment?
I do think that these tax proposals are the ones that make the most sense, and I also will always be married to the outcomes of what we fund with that.
And EMTs, please, sir.
Yeah, I look forward to I look forward to following up on the hearing, and I think the point for me is also, when we're building our city hall, we're building it with an assessment of excellence and an assessment of fluency. And when we're thinking about fire, when we're thinking about EMT, I also want to be surrounding myself with those who have been doing this work before coming to a conclusion that would affect the lives of many New Yorkers.
Thank you, sir.
I wonder if you could
Good morning. So Mayor Adams now plans to designate the Elizabeth Street Garden as parkland. I know previously you spoke about that site potentially being used as affordable housing. Does his actions hinder your plans for the site? What do you make of it? And how do you envision, how this site should be used moving forward?
It is no surprise that Mayor Adams is using his final weeks and months to cement a legacy of dysfunction and inconsistency. And I've made clear over the course of the campaign what my vision would be in meeting the urgent need of building affordable housing, especially for seniors across New York City. And the actions that the Adams administration has taken now make it nearly impossible to follow through with that.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could, two things. I wonder if you could comment on where you are with NYPD. There's a bit of reporting that Dean Foulahan may want oversight of NYPD, and how it sits with the mayor. And then secondly, I guess stay on the previous topic. Can you talk about how you get this funded if there is no appetite for a tax on the wealthy in Albany? How do you get it funded? It's a goal, but if it can't get funded, then I think you're going to have a lot of upset parents.
Well, I'm glad that we won't have to entertain the hypothetical, and that's because I am confident of what this coalition can accomplish, and the fact that it's a coalition that also not just includes myself, not just the governor, but also we've seen time and again in the Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, in the Majority Leader of the State Senate Andrea Stewart-Cousins, commitments, as you can see in their one-house budgets, to taking the steps that would make New York City more affordable. And that, to me, is why it's also important that I am standing here alongside two elected members, whether it be in the State Assembly or the City Council, for whom this has been part of their compass, part of their fight. I think for far too long in Albany, the missing piece has not been that of Albany. It's actually been that of City Hall coming to champion a vision that would serve all of our shared constituents. And I look forward to the continued conversations that we will be having with Commissioner Tisch, with the NYPD at large, in delivering on a vision for public safety, and also ensuring that it is safety and justice that is driving the decision making, as opposed to what we've seen under the current administration, where oftentimes it has more to do with who you know than what you're doing.
All right, we've got time for one more, Melissa.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa.
How are you? Good morning.
Doing well.
You mentioned a legacy of dysfunction that you think Mayor Adams is possibly trying to cement. We talked about the Elizabeth Street Gardens, but there's also the trip to Israel, there's the Rent Guidelines Board. Do you feel like he's acting in good faith in terms of a smooth transition? Is this, what do you think's going on? And is it going to impact your ability to have a sort of good faith transition?
I think the mayor is free to travel wherever he wants and to spend his time however he would like to. I will say that while I vehemently disagree with a number of the decisions that he's taken, his administration has also been open in the transition work that we are doing. They have been collaborative, and I look forward to the conversation that I will have with him when he returns, because what New Yorkers are looking forward to is a city hall where they can expect taking on these crises as opposed to creating them themselves. And I look forward in building my administration to have one that is ready on January 1st, not for the work of preparing, not for the work of understanding, but for the work of delivering. And that's what we view these next 49 days for.
When you said it's nearly impossible, what Eric Adams did with Elizabeth Street Garden, are you giving up on the idea of building housing there?
What I am coming to terms with is the lengths that the Adams administration has taken to ensure that they are cementing the position that they held the opposite view on just earlier this year.
Will you ask the legislature to alienate the parkland once you take office?
My focus will be on working with the legislature to fulfill the affordability agenda that I've been working on.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all so much. Thank you guys.
One more on topic.
All right, you were just listening to the mayor-elect there, Zoran Mandani, in New York with his plans for universal child care within the city. Obviously, he had just been elected in a very high-profile race against the former governor there of New York, Cuomo, and he took that victory there. And now he is laying out what he hopes to do once he is officially in office. You can hear the questions there that was asked of him in that moment. We do want to just for a little bit go back to the presentation that's taking place in North Carolina. Again, before we get to our next thing, if you remember the Ukrainian refugee who was brutally murdered, stabbed to death on that transit route in Charlotte, North Carolina, it led to laws being put in place in her honor, in her name, Arena's Law. And so what's happening today is you have emergency physicians, doctors, and experts giving a presentation, particularly on what it would take when it comes for providing mental health care and other services to make sure that those who may be experiencing some form of episode have what they need and that they can all meet the standards and have the space within emergency departments for this new law that is expected to roll out within the next year. So I'll send it back to that for just a little bit. And then once we come back, we have meteorologist Hunter Force who's in with us. And we're going to talk about this forecast as we gear up towards the weekend. Thank goodness it's not as cold as it was a few days ago. But let's go back to the North Carolina House Committee just for a few moments, and we'll come back in just a bit.
Press. This list is not exhaustive by any means, and we are certainly open to additional recommendations on behalf of the committee if you have them. We are looking to speak with the most critical stakeholders at the national, state, and local levels, as well as any trusted expert researchers. So here we highlight two models that we are using to guide our thinking about how to organize the research studies to maximize efficiencies and guard against duplicative efforts. The process outlined in House Bill 307 requires research for each component, each step in the process, including initial response, mental health evaluation, involuntary commitment, incarceration, and post-release monitoring and treatment, which we have mapped to the sequential intercept model, which is a national framework that details how individuals with mental and substance use disorders come into contact with and move through the criminal justice system to understand how existing research could inform future work on these studies. So this is a preliminary list of initial research questions based on careful review of House Bill 307 and early conversations with committee chairs and staff and the stakeholders referenced on an earlier slide. These are big and bold, complex questions that focus on mapping the existing conditions of the systems in North Carolina, identifying promising practices from other states that could be adapted to the North Carolina context, defining current met and unmet needs in the system, including everything from staffing to facilities to data, examining ongoing pilot projects around the state that seem to be having a positive impact, but need focused research to gather evidence about what is working and why. And finally, the biggest question of all, and what is about potential impacts of the changes enacted by House Bill 307 and how the state should prepare for full implementation beginning in 2027. We expect to fund multiple studies to address these questions. And finally, this slide provides an overview of the study parameters as we currently see them. Multiple study teams from multiple universities with coordination by the collaboratory, focused on juveniles and adults separately, given how different those systems work, using up to $1 million of funding that the legislature directed the collaboratory to reallocate from a previously funded study. We hope to begin these studies quickly, January 1, in order to get you your preliminary report by April 1, which will likely be an update on the progress of the research studies, along with any early policy recommendations for the short session. We will send a research brief November 1 with any early findings, with a final report with policy recommendations and next steps due March 1st, as outlined in the legislation. Here, we've also listed possible research activities, which include review of existing evidence, analysis of existing data, as well as collecting new data from stakeholders and engaging directly with you and other state and local leaders as these studies progress. Given the complexity of the intersection of justice and public safety and mental health systems in North Carolina, we anticipate there will be legislative interest in supplemental research beyond 2027, and the North Carolina Collaboratory stands ready to assist in any way. Representatives Blackwell and Reeder, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Collaboratory. I'm happy to answer any questions as time allows, but this is what we've been able to pull together in a month.
Questions from members of the committee for Dr. Korn? My goodness. We can go back to Representative Torbett for questions. But Mr. Botts is gone. So you'll have to go later.
All right, we just wanted to kind of glean in. We might go in and out of there at different points in times if there's something interesting happening that's being discussed there, again, out of North Carolina and their mental health emergency services that they can provide for people within the state. But right now, we have meteorologist Hunter Forst, who is joining with us as we're inching closer to the weekend. A lot of events that are taking place. But really, I think, Hunter, a lot of people are still trying to think, okay, is the weekend going to be closer to a nicer kind of temp that we've experienced maybe within the last 24 hours, or those cold temps that we had earlier in the week were low-key brutal when it came to snow flurries even being in the area?
Luckily, it's going to be a pretty warm weekend for November, at least on Sunday. We could see some 70s returning, so that'll be nice. Saturday will be a bit cooler, but still comfortable in the mid to low 60s. With a good amount of sunshine. So it's going to be a fantastic November weekend coming up. So if you have any outdoor plans, I know there's a few things going on Saturday. You have the Heart Walk down in Virginia Beach. So that should be looking good. And the Norfolk State game against Morgan State is at, I believe kickoff is at noon. So should be a great day for it.
Great. Awesome. And I'm glad you said that about the Heart Walk with the American Heart Association, because, I'm going to be emceeing. I've done that the last few years. And last year, it was so cold. I mean, it was the first year that I can remember where I had to wear a full-on coat. And, we like to have a good time when we're out there. You're exercising ahead of time. You're mixing and you're mingling. You're doing all of these kind of fun things. People dress up. They have cheerleaders who come out, all those kind of things, and it's right there at the ocean front, which feels even cooler because oftentimes that wind is hitting us in the face too.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to know that I don't have to deal with that this year. And I'm sure people who are listening, if you have not already registered or you're thinking about just come do so as we're raising support for those who are impacted by heart disease. But Hunter, I know that we're looking into, you said this weekend it should be good for folks. This time of year is pretty typical, when it comes to the forecast, because it feels like an up and down week.
Yeah, November can be tough. You get crazy dips and turns with the jet stream this time of year. So that is what can lead to all of these crazy temperature swings. So that normally happens around, as we get into late fall, closer to winter, we get these crazy temperature swings. Our average high is around 63 for this time of year. So comfortable, but, we could have days where, like what we've had where it's only, 48 degrees for a high. But luckily, we're going to continue to stay nice and sunny over the next couple of days, seasonable, so we'll be right around average. And then we'll have a nice, much warmer Sunday back into the lower 70s with a chance for a few showers heading into next week. But overall, we're just going to stay dry through today and into tomorrow through the weekend. We'll be right around 60 today. Sunny, cool, but it'll be pleasant. Could be a slight breeze outside. But not as breezy as what we were seeing yesterday. And it was a cloudier start to the day as well. But we're starting to see more sunshine seeping through. And you'll notice that as we head into the next couple of days, we're going to be ahead of this cold front. So as we head into Saturday, we'll be warmer. And then especially on Sunday, we'll be in this warm sector, low pressure system up to our north. So that'll help keep our winds more out of the south. So that's what's going to help bring up more of that warmer air. But then we'll have that cold front push through heading into Monday, and that's what's going to keep us cool pretty much for all of next week, similar to what we were seeing today. But tomorrow we'll be in the upper 50s to right around 60, mid to low 60s on Saturday, and then we're back up to around 70 on Sunday. And then all of next week just staying pretty November-like in the upper 50s to low 60s, so no major temperature swings on the horizon after Sunday. So you'll need that light jacket, maybe even heavier jacket, especially in the morning, handy heading into next week. But as we take a live look outside, we're starting to see a few more peaks of blue skies out there. Temperatures have climbed up into the mid to upper 50s. 56 in Norfolk and Virginia Beach, or around 58 in Hampton, 56 in Newport News and Suffolk, 55 in Elizabeth City, and 55 degrees down in Manio. And as we take a look at our satellite, we were seeing some of those clouds earlier this morning, and we're starting to see those push out of here. So we're starting to see more of that sunshine. If you are stepping out the door, things should be looking pretty good. And we'll rise into the upper 50s to low 60s this afternoon, staying dry. And if you have any plans this evening, jacket needed, mid to upper 40s to right around 50. It'll be cool, and we'll drop quickly overnight tonight in terms of those temperatures. Waking up Friday morning, some of us in the mid to even lower 30s possibly. So it'll be a chilly start to the day. Winds out of the north and west helping to drag in that cooler air. Then by the afternoon, upper 50s to right around 60 degrees. And then we drop into the low 50s by Friday night. So if you have any Friday night planned, it's still looking good. But we're not going to be as cold waking up Saturday morning. It'll be comfortable. By about 7, 8 o'clock, we're right around 50 degrees. Winds more out of the west, southwest. And that'll help, keep our temperatures comfortable for most of the weekend. 62 on Saturday, mostly sunny skies. And that leads us into an even warmer Sunday, right around 70 degrees. You love to see it, especially this time of year. That's going to be feeling really, really nice. Now, as that cold front pushes through, can maybe squeeze out a sprinkle or two, but I think most of us will be fine. I think it'll be another fantastic weekend. Not expecting, some of those storms like we saw last week at night. During the afternoon last week, it was really nice, but we saw a few thunderstorms Sunday evening, but this weekend, really not expecting much, which will be really nice. But also today is 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving.
Which is crazy.
I know. This year flew by. I feel like it's one of the quickest years I've ever experienced. And then we have about 42 days left until Christmas, which is absolutely wild. I have zero Christmas shopping done.
Oh, no. I haven't even thought about Christmas, to be honest with you. The holidays, truly.
I haven't even either.
I mean, I know that I'll be working Thanksgiving, so I haven't thought about that, but
too.
where I might eat or where I might gathered afterwards, none of that. So Christmas is too far in advance. I know that you haven't really thought about it. Naya, have you thought about it at this point yet?
I have, because I'm trying to plan my trip to Florida for Christmas.
Smart.
Yeah, sounds good. Florida for the holidays doesn't sound like a bad plan.
No. I'll be heading north, so it'll be chilly. Are you going to go to the beach if it's warm? Would you?
Probably.
Nice.
If it's warm enough.
Jacksonville could be a little iffy.
Yeah.
In the winter. It could be 30 or 80.
Exactly. In a span of 24 hours.
Yeah. I mean, it was just in the 30s waking up the other day when we had that cold snap.
Mhm.
How was your family down there? Were they saying anything about it?
Well, my sister, she's in Tallahassee, and she was like, "Oh my God, it's freezing cold." And I was like, it's not as cold here, and I sent her the snow pictures.
Oof. Yeah, it must have been a tough couple of days.
Must be tough, right?
For those Floridians.
Iguanas falling out of trees.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid you have to wear a jacket in Florida. All of a sudden you think you're in Antarctica.
I know.
Must be nice, but it is good. I mean, the countdown is certainly on. A lot of people making their plans, not just for what they will do, but travel too. Before we transition to this next topic here, Hunter, I do want to ask, I know that I'm really throwing a curveball to you here, but is there any way that you all can even like predict if, I mean, we had our snow flurries earlier this week. Do the conditions or I don't know, all of you guys is weather magic. Thoughts on the potential of snow by the end of the year?
By the end of the year, I mean, you could kind of look at patterns, whether if it's going to be cooler than average.
Don't let me get you in trouble, Hunter.
But you can't really predict, like, if there will be actual snow on the ground. So if it's cooler than average and, you know, wetter than average, then you could say that there's a higher chance, higher probability that there could be some snow on the ground. But you can't really, you know, give like a certain answer, whether, you know, whether in regards to like how much or how cold it's actually gonna be. So if you want a white Christmas, I would say cross your fingers.
Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Hunter. I was just trying to put it out there. You know, we get closer to this, and after what we experienced the other day, more and more people are thinking, oh, could we get a white Christmas? I know it's too far out to look at that, but you want to have the conversation anyway. Meteorologist Hunter Force, we appreciate you so much. And here's the other factor. We were just talking about making your plans. A lot of people have been trying to, but they've been hesitant because of what's been going on at airports. Let's see if we can take here, News 1, Channel 1. We got a live look. Speaking of airports, I want to say that is in Chicago. O'Hare is what I would imagine. Let me see if I can confirm that of all my many times. It sure is Chicago O'Hare right there. It's my many times having to fly out of that airport for the time in which I lived in Illinois for roughly a decade. You can see travelers are making their way through the airport, and we have been reporting on the delays and cancellations that have been taking place because of those flight reductions by the FAA. The FAA has said that that was done in order to bring about, make sure they hit all safety precautions, not only with the government shutdown, but with staff reduction and shortages. And we know that they had started to reduce those flights at 4% just last Tuesday. The idea was that it would go all the way up to 10% by tomorrow. But we do know now by Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy that those flight reductions will be capped at 6% now that the government shutdown is over, and they say that more air traffic controllers and other transportation employees are returning to work. Okay, again, those cuts started at 4, I believe it was last Friday. I said Tuesday, last Friday, and then got to 6%. The idea was that it was going to go up to 8% today and then 10% tomorrow. Now it is capped at 6%. But that still means that there have been plenty of people who have dealt with cancellations. I'm looking at the FlightAware map right now, looking at cancellations within, into, or out of the U.S., just under 1,000 today. There have been days in which that number has hit 1,600 and 1,800, but today it is just under 1,000 cancellations so far, according to FlightAware in the United States. And that obviously has a trickle-down effect, not just in those 40 busy, heavily traveled airports that are really the ones in which are being mandated for these reductions. But we have seen impacts even here in Norfolk International Airport with flights being canceled to and from, like New York, JFK, and also delays that people have experienced in getting to Norfolk or out. So that has been something we have been monitoring. Maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel now, especially as we get closer, as Hunter just said, exactly 2 weeks from Thanksgiving. There's some daylight there that this issue could be more resolved in the coming days. Again, now that the shutdown has completed and people are returning to work. Again, that shutdown, the longest in history, ended just last night. The government, the president signing that bill that was passed by both the Senate and the House, and ending a 43-day stalemate. They're again, well over the 35-day previous mark. Give me a quick second here, because we're going to continue having this conversation on the government shutdown, but the impact that it's having in individual cities. I'm going to get on the phone here and make a call, and hopefully on the other side of, I'll go ahead and mute myself for a little bit while I dial. We'll have Mayor Bobby Dyer, who agreed to come on to talk about the impact of what he saw here in Virginia Beach, where he is the mayor, and his thoughts now that things are back open. Give me just a quick second to get him on the phone, and we'll have that conversation. All right, appreciate your patience, everybody. I have Virginia Beach Mayor Bobby Dyer on the phone. And Mayor, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, and hello, everybody, and thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time. Okay, you wrote a letter a few weeks ago to our local U.S. representatives, asking them to reach some form of deal and conclusion to this government shutdown, saying that it was impacting your constituents in Virginia Beach. My first question to you, now that a deal has been reached, the government is back open, what are your thoughts this morning about things finally coming to a conclusion?
Well, I'm very grateful that things are over. And I think this, once again, there was a lot of concern about safety, especially with air traffic controllers out, people not being able to get food, people being laid off, military not being paid. And, we can't live in a state of perpetual gridlock like we have been, quite frankly, for the last few years, and expect to really survive and thrive as a nation.
You mentioned, we know in Hampton Roads, we have a huge military community, and Virginia Beach obviously has a lot of those people living within your particular city. When you're talking to your constituents over the last 6 to 7 weeks of this shutdown, what are some of the things that you have been hearing from them, not just in what they wanted, but the stuff that they were experiencing during this time frame, particularly in not getting a paycheck?
Well, the other thing is that the first concern, people are scratching their head and asking why. Why did they have to shut down? Why did it, as I indicated in my letter, why did they have to wait to the 11th hour to bring forward the problem of, the continued extension of the Obamacare benefits and stuff. This is stuff that could have been resolved, quite frankly, during the last administration if they wanted. So the question is the why, and were there political implications here? But I really think, we got to get out of the habit and not have a standard that every time we're going to do a continuing resolution or something along that line, that we're going to have the ability to, hold the entire country hostage, to settle a dispute. That's not the way we should do things.
And I'll ask you again, a lot of people you said asked you why. I think for those who did not experience, those who weren't federal employees or they weren't impacted by the trickle-down effect of it, I think they've been hearing us talk about the government shutdown. They've been hearing us talk about the stalemate in Washington and the different positions, et cetera. But even from the standpoint of just everyday folks, were you getting any kind of indication on how they were doing? And have you talked to anybody who who was impacted since this all kind of resolved itself within the last several hours?
I'll tell you what, we just got to wait and see. It's going to take a while to get the air traffic control back to work and things operating. And, people were really concerned about this thing going beyond Thanksgiving. And, but don't forget, I think it's going to show that there were not millions, but billions of dollars of adverse political impact that really damaged our economy and slowed our growth down. It's amazing that the stock market was able to hold, and I think that shows some of the resilience of our economy. But when we talk about Joe Sixpack and their family, and even though it might not have affected them now, it would directly or indirectly affected them going forward. A lot of people were scared. We got to stop shutting government down. We got to learn how to fix problems.
And, I'd imagine that will be a similar sentiment you have, because this does go until January 20th, is the end of January, January 30th, for, this temporary spending measure. And I would imagine your thoughts and remarks will be the same for our lawmakers to figure out their differences before that point, because, Mayor, we could see another shutdown if something could happen if the deal is not reached by then.
Well, I believe your station did a feature on the article that I wrote, and I begged for unity and put our differences aside, figure out what we have in common, and stop all this silly bickering. Both parties got hijacked by their extreme elements, and we are polarized and paralyzed. And my goodness, we reached a point where if you even talk to somebody in the other party, you're ostracized. And, we can't function as a government like that. And I believe in the interview I had with your station, I said, okay, even if we start working on healthcare, unless we start working in the sandbox together and put, dare I say, hatred and our petty differences aside and learn to work together, we're going to keep on going through this. And, we don't need a sense of continuing resolutions. What we need is a budget that's voted to put in place because the continuing resolutions really have an adverse effect on our military in terms of how to spend and get the things that we need. This is intolerable.
And Mayor, I'll ask you this last question too. When you're talking about the healthcare and the tax credit extensions, you wrote in that letter, as you just mentioned, you were talking about that, drawing on your experience within the healthcare industry. And it was interesting. We had both Democratic and Republican lawmakers here within our area who said, this was an issue that really needed to be discussed. The difference was, when do you discuss it? Well, now that the government is back open, the question was, okay, now we can hold that discussion. They'll say they'll have a vote. But you said that, you also think that it's an important conversation to have. What do you kind of hope gets resolved when it comes to health care?
Well, I'll tell you what, like I said, I got 45 years, treating patients, being a hospital executive and teaching healthcare on the graduate level. I kind of know what I'm talking about. And, the point is that, since it was 1929 with Blue Cross, healthcare finance has been in a state of flux. And I'm also of the school that the Affordable Health Care Act, aka Obamacare, was designed to fail because some people want a single payer system, also known as socialized medicine. And, but once again, the only people making money under the ACA were the health insurance companies and their stockholders. And like I recommended, let's go back to work. Let's do a blue ribbon commission. Let's get, a people that put their partisan stripes aside, sit at a table, get subject matter experts, and come up with a better mousetrap.
Well, we'll certainly see what happens here in the next few weeks, as it has been said that there was an agreement to hold a discussion and a vote on health care, but we know that was a huge portion of what caused this stalemate with the government shutdown. Virginia Beach Mayor Bobby Dyer, we appreciate you. Thanks for hopping on the phone and talking with me this morning, sir.
Hey, always keep on doing the good work you guys do, and keep the public informed, and I'll be here whenever you need me, my friend. Take care.
All right, Mayor, we appreciate you. Take care today.
Bye-bye.
All right, so you heard there from Virginia Beach Mayor Bobby Dyer, just giving his insight now that the government shutdown has concluded after these 43 days. And so you can hear it from him. Again, that letter he wrote just a few weeks ago. We did do a story after he sent it out to our lawmakers here representing Hampton Roads, that he wanted them to, at the time, figure out a way that this can be resolved. But he also wanted to talk about his health care. He shared his opinion on that there. So, of course, we will see what takes place in the next few weeks. Again, with that promised vote on health care. We're not quite sure exactly if or when that will happen, but it has been promised, according to several lawmakers, and what that would mean for those tax credit subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, which are expected to expire December 31st, which many say would mean a very large increase on people's health care premiums. So we are going to be waiting to see what happens with that at the moment. So I just wanted to bring him in and to have that conversation. But for right now, let's go ahead and take let's see here. This is News 1 Channel 5 here. Just give a quick update. If you remember, we've been going back and forth outside of Chicago to that Broadview ICE facility there. We've seen protests there over the last several weeks. We've seen people being detained and arrested outside of this facility. We've seen this facility be the center of a legal battle in terms of the conditions it has. Well, today, a federal judge just started a few minutes ago is touring this ICE facility, and it comes after there were court reviews claiming that the conditions inside the building were not suitable for those who were being housed there, and looking into how people were processed in ICE custody. So this tour is going to last for several hours. Right now we have a live picture from our affiliate there within that community in Illinois. What we know at this point is that there is a judge, a magistrate, who's going to be walking inside with their team, looking at holding cells, the processing rooms, the areas where people are searched and identified. They will be allowed to take photographs as well, though they must be reviewed by the government before they can be released. So maybe we will get some form of pictures released today as well, or in the coming days, from inside of this facility. We are not quite sure at the moment. But I wanted to take us to that. Again, the court's filings were showing that the conditions were just not good for detainees. Of course, the government is insisting that they did receive food, water, basic care while they were there. But again, the judge is going to be looking through that facility to see for themselves exactly what they are able to see. And so I just wanted to spot that up at the moment for you to to glean as well. Let's see what's going on with News 1 Channel 2. I can tell you what we have from ABC. If we split over here, we've had a camera that's been looking outside of a federal courthouse in which there is a court proceeding that was taking place today. In that case, featuring former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James also. Their attorneys were pressing for a judge to throw out their criminal indictments. We do have motion that's taking place outside right now. You can see here where we have camera crews outside of that federal facility, a federal courtroom, where these individuals just walked out. Now, none of them are either former FBI Director James Comey or the New York Attorney General Letitia James, who was here in Norfolk not long ago. But again, this is all to press a judge to throw out the criminal indictments that have been plagued against them in separate cases for different reasons. But they've come out of the Eastern District of Virginia, which is a part of right here in Norfolk as well. If you recall, the lead U.S. attorney for that district was pushed out by the president earlier this year after he reportedly refused to bring up any criminal charges against James and Comey, which many people have argued since that has now come down, that it is the president pushing his own judicial department to go after his political enemies. If you remember, James in New York brought forward that civil case in which she looked at the president's earnings as well and how he was listing some of his businesses, and that was successful. However, the reward in that case was negated by an appeals court after that. And then you have now Comey, former FBI director, who has been an opponent of the president here openly and looked into that case, looking into the president years ago as well. He has been pleading not guilty to allegedly making false statements to Congress. Meanwhile, James, she has pleaded not guilty to mortgage fraud related charges that are out of here in Norfolk, Virginia. They are arguing that the cases that are made against them have been, quote, fatally flawed because of the current interim attorney who's been placed in that Eastern District of Virginia for the U.S. Attorney's Office, Lindsay Halligan, saying that the appointment had violated the Constitution's appointments clause, meaning she shouldn't be able to be in the role and bring those challenges against them. So again, you see out there, you have people who have been protesting this. Just a few, again, weeks ago, we had Letitia James, who had a court proceeding in Norfolk, Virginia. Right here, we heard her comments shortly after she pleaded not guilty. But again, this is another step in the legal proceedings of both of those cases, as their attorneys who may have been the individuals we saw walking out. We're not clear. We're not sure. We just know that we've been positioned out there with our affiliate crews waiting for some kind of movement. We just saw some people walking out. As soon as we get some information from what was particularly said inside of that, if we get it during the stream, of course, I'll bring it out. But just wanted to go to it as soon as we saw movement, because we've been waiting for anything all day since we've been on this stream. At least since this morning. So that is the latest there. We'll see if their attempt to throw out that case is successful. But for now, we're going to have to wait and see what came out of that courtroom. I do want to head back just briefly. I said that we'd just be checking in and out of that North Carolina House Committee, their conversation regarding mental health support and emergency support there for people there. This all kind of coming after, by looking at the briefings ahead of this meeting, of that law that was passed following the brutal killing of that Ukrainian refugee on that light rail in Charlotte, North Carolina. There have now been things put in place there in law in North Carolina so that things of this nature can hopefully be prevented. They're looking now at the mental health aspect of it. So let's listen in for a few minutes, see what kind of questions, where they are in this public safety debate. And we still have about 30 minutes left in this stream, and we'll reconvene after we listen in.
In-house counsel, on the one hand, we don't meet the legal criteria to keep them, but you don't want to just put them out, in the street. And there are even times where there were kids who weren't in DSS custody, and parents didn't want to come pick the child up because of the behaviors they previously exhibited. And then you're in the situation where the child's not really dependent, because you can't be dependent based on the child's actions, but are they neglected and abandoned? Do you want to do that? And then you talk to DSS, and even if we started that process, if a parent refused to pick them up, DSS doesn't have placement in a PRTF or some type of level 3 facility that can treat the child. So that's not there wasn't a good answer, and except maybe more facilities. That just really emphasized that was something that really was a headache to deal with. And then at the same time, like y'all mentioned, the patient is taking bed space and otherwise preventing folks who need that acute setting from being able to be seen. And so it's a difficult problem. But I would just emphasize, that I've experienced what y'all presented.
Further questions or comments? If not, thank you, ladies, for your presentation. We'll look forward to getting more recommendations. You don't have any more slides you were holding back to surprise me with, do you?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. We're going to move now to Dr. Jeremiah Gaddy. And there's some initials here that I'm going to guess stand for that he is a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians, and is here on behalf of the North Carolina College of Emergency Physicians. Dr. Gaddy, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremiah Gaddy. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I started my career in emergency medicine almost 16 years ago. I was EMT basic and progressed to an advanced EMT, then to a paramedic, and then eventually decided to go to medical school. And I've had the privilege of serving as a medical director in a community, medical director in Afghanistan in the military, and now being able to serve as a spokesperson for the North Carolina College of Emergency Physicians. To highlight what this organization represents represents over 1,100 emergency physicians across the state. We work in hospitals as well as specifically in the emergency departments, but also in critical care units. And before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the tragedy that created this entire conversation. The murder of Irina Zarutska, and even recently of Officer Smith, highlights all of the work that we need to do. And we join with you as advocates trying to find a solution to this. We share in your desire to protect our public. We also want to share in the desire to protect our patients in the emergency department, but also our healthcare teams. And this was perfectly demonstrated at the previous presentation, because what we really want to focus on, and the three things that I would encourage you all to think about, is providing the right care at the right time and in the right place. And if we focus on those three things, I really believe that we will be able to make an impact to all North Carolinians. So to start this conversation, I think it's important for you to all understand what emergency medicine is, what we are designed to do, and what we are trained to do, and then what also we are not. The American Board of Emergency Medicine essentially defines an emergency physician as a physician that focuses on immediate decision-making and action to prevent death and further disability. And that's very important because we are acute care specialists. That's what we intervene on. We will see all types of patients from every walk of life, and we focus on trying to make sure that we can intervene on those behavioral emergencies or medical emergencies. It is also important to note that we do not, nor are we trained to provide care for non-emergent psychiatric evaluations. We do not provide judicial assessments or capacity hearings. That is far outside of our scope of practice. And the important thing to know is that we will always respond without hesitation, right? You saw it during the pandemic 2 years ago. We will always be there during the next pandemic. We will be there for a terrorist attack, for a mass casualty event. That is our job and our honor. But it is important to also recognize the limitations that we have. And so I want to walk you through the current IVC process and the strain that we are currently undergoing right now, even under current law, not with the implementation of Irina's law. The current process, and I want to make sure that I want to reiterate what was brought up before, that a person that is IVC, we have an imminent concern about their intentions to harm someone else or themselves, right? It is imminent. That is why they are being brought to an emergency department, and that is part of our job. So when a patient comes into the emergency department, they will see an emergency physician who will often be the first examiner that was referenced earlier. Our specialty, as you can imagine, is to intervene on anything that's required at that moment. But there's a very complex history here that we actually often require a specialist, a psychiatrist, to be able to give us further information, to dive into collateral information from family members, from friends. And so we, without a doubt, well, I shouldn't say without a doubt, oftentimes will consult a telepsychiatrist. And it is important that I note this, telepsychiatrists. That is the vast, I would argue, the majority of patients that actually receive an evaluation in an emergency department will receive a telepsychiatry consultation. There's a misnomer that we all have a psychiatrist, right, in the hospital. Because they're in the hospital, that they will just come down and see a patient. But that is not the clinical reality. The vast majority of these patients will see a telepsychiatrist, and usually within 1 to 2 days, we will be able to have an evaluation of, do they need to come into the hospital to seek inpatient care? And if so, then we will do so because we're not sure that they're safe enough for themselves or for others to go out into the community. If they do decide to go down this pathway of admission, then we are in a longer waiting game. And that waiting game, as has been previously described, has been days to weeks, sometimes to months, depending on both the patient and and the facility. And another thing that's often thought of is that at least they're in a safe place, right? They're in a behavioral health unit. But the vast majority of these patients are not in a behavioral health unit. A lot of hospitals or emergency departments do not have a behavioral health unit. Large academic centers may, but even if you have a large academic center that has a behavioral health unit, they are overran, and we are now spilling back into just the main ED. And what you can imagine is that this is just a stripped-down emergency department bed where we are trying to provide the care that they deserve, but with the understanding that we lack the both specialist care to do so. And one of the biggest concerns, I was at a small hospital 2 days ago asking about the security and the workplace violence efforts that were ongoing at this hospital, and their biggest concern is that they don't have a space for these individuals, and so they are around vulnerable patients. These types of patients are the ones seeking emergency care as well, right? They're trying to get care for their stroke or for their asthma exacerbation. And these are very vulnerable patients, and what we know is that as these behavioral health patients sit and the longer that they wait, they are certainly have a higher incidence of having workplace violence. So to put this into perspective, it's important for you to also know kind of what the goal is. The recommendation for boarding a psychiatric patient or boarding in general is 4 hours. This is from the Joint Commission. And it's important to note, too, that this recommendation is clearly, we are far past that from a North Carolina perspective. This is the average wait time for a state psychiatric hospital. Sorry, I just went past that. And as you can imagine, these patients are sitting there waiting, and this is not just adults, these are also children here, which has often been cited earlier. I think the last statistic I saw was that 50 children spend the night in the emergency department or DSS offices every week in North Carolina. And if you can imagine the chaos of an emergency department by design or by the actual nature of where we work, you'll see that this in itself creates its own tension. And what we ultimately also experience is a lot of workplace violence. And unfortunately, we just had this happen 5 days ago, right? A workplace violence event where someone lost their life. Across America, we are 5 times likely to be assaulted or to experience workplace violence than any other field in the United States. And in North Carolina, 1 in 3 hospital workers, or healthcare workers, I should say, will experience workplace violence. And so I want to paint this picture because this is all without what we're describing with Irena's law. What we have right now has been described as a crisis-driven model, which is that we are only giving care whenever a patient is in crisis in the emergency department, right? There's not this preventative effort or at least resources yet. And so they will seek care because we're the front door there. And the challenge that we have is that if we are now going to take a patient or a person that has actually been violent recently and they are medically stable, they don't have an emergent need, right? They are medically stable, but now we are requesting them to go to an emergency department. All of these pressures that we have spoken about will increase significantly so. And I want to ask the question, and I would pose this question to you as a committee, is there a time essence that is required for this? Because if not, then is the emergency department the best setting, right? We are talking about the right care, the right time, and the right place. If we are saying that the person has a history, has a violent act, they are in custody, are they a threat to someone else, to the public, or themselves right now? Maybe. And if so, then maybe the emergency department is the best place. But if they are in custody, are they really a threat to themselves or to others? And can we wait to actually get a judicial evaluation or a telepsychiatric consultation? Because the question is not if they may benefit from mental health care. I think that everyone could agree that makes sense, right? But the timing of it is the question that I would pose to this committee. We've briefly talked about this from a law enforcement impact and our concerns. We work closely, obviously, with law enforcement. One of the things that we see with justice-involved individuals is the fact that they are tied to that person, often depending on the agency that was mentioned and or the healthcare system. But oftentimes, if a person is coming in for medical treatment and they are in custody, that officer will often stay with them. And we're talking about transporting a patient here that, again, is medically stable and taking that officer away from the community that they love to serve. And as we've discussed, these shared spaces are going to increase the safety risk for everyone involved. So while the goal of Irena's law is to obtain safety and a timely evaluation, what I'm most concerned about, and we are concerned about, is that this is actually going to create a delay and even further resource strains for both the individuals and the patients trying to seek emergency care. We want to partner with yourselves, with mental health, and with law enforcement to provide the best care for these patients. And we believe that telepsychiatry bridges the legislative intent with the clinical reality. And I'm going to repeat that statement. It bridges legislative intent with clinical reality. Telepsychiatry, in my opinion, is certainly the path forward. Because we've already shown this in North Carolina, right? We actually have a program with telepsychiatry. Now, the intent is to expand access to patients, right, from different areas. And this could be, the intent is to expand it also out into the community, not just in emergency departments. It starts in rural emergency departments because that's obviously the best place to implement this. But its intent is to expand it elsewhere in the community settings. There's also been actually pilots looking at capacity restorations for justice-involved individuals that have shown that it's been beneficial to both decrease the amount of time in hospitals and to expedite care. This is not as complicated as it may seem. This is essentially an iPad and or a television monitor that follows a patient into a room. And that's pretty much what a telepsychiatry consultation is. And I would recommend that if we're saying that telepsychiatry is what patients receive in an emergency department, and we believe that there's not an imminent harm to themselves or others, then would they not benefit more, and would the officer not be able to spend less time transporting, and would the healthcare staff not be impacted as much, or the other patients trying to receive emergent care, if we actually perform that in an outpatient setting, even in a jail? This is not atypical. We actually go into people's homes with healthcare technology right now, and it just requires an iPad. So I think that there is a lot of opportunities here. We were asked to give recommendations. I did not leave it as the last slide, but I've got this as kind of bullet points here. One recommendation that we would emphasize is that if we are to say that a patient needs to go emergently to an emergency department, the expectation would be that there is an imminent risk to someone else or others in the setting of them being in custody. And if we do not believe that them to be an imminent risk to someone else or themselves while in custody, then they should receive judicial evaluations just like they would in the emergency department, but via telepsychiatry. And that's part of the second bullet point that you'll see here, expanding telepsychiatry. There is, we would recommend a 24/7 call center. This is something that has already, with these pilots, this would not be hard to expand upon. It would take some time and money, I'm sure, but also to increase the behavioral health units, which were mentioned earlier, the crisis centers, and I would be remiss not to speak about increasing the workplace violence mitigation efforts that we drastically need in these emergency departments. Last but not least, we would certainly recommend improving the real-time data collection, right? How do we actually know what the target that we're achieving? Are we achieving these targets? And I think that there's a lot of metrics that we could look at to see if we could actually make a meaningful impact. All right, I think that was quick. Hopefully I've been able to talk with you about kind of the current situation as an emergency physician, about what our intent is to help you as much as we possibly can and these patients, but to hopefully be able to keep focusing on the right care for them, that they do need mental health services. But when they need it and where they need it, I think still needs more investigation. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Gaddy. Members of the committee, questions or comments for Dr. Gaddy? Representative Torbett, you're up first.
I'd be remiss. He didn't touch on it very long, but thank you for your service in the sandbox, young man. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions or comments? You've made an impressive presentation that you've either confused us or you've convinced us.
I hope it's the latter.
We'll have to be evaluated.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Our final presentation is the magistrate's perspective on involuntary commitments. And we'd like to welcome Christopher Graves. Mr. Graves is the Wake County Chief Magistrate. And it has here on my list something about the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts. I'm not sure if you're speaking for them also, or if they're simply saying magistrates are under AOC. But in any event, please, podium is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to present today. My name is Christopher Graves. I've served as the Wake County Chief Magistrate for almost 7 years now, and as a magistrate for almost 18 years now. A long time ago, I got to serve as a house page, so it's unique to be back here in this capacity. And to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I believe I'm here in the capacity as a magistrate, but under AOC. Thank you. All right, so I want to briefly touch on North Carolina magistrates and IVC law, and then provide some commentary about potential impact of ARENA's law. So first of all, Some of this Mr. Botts went over, so I don't want to bore you guys to death, but anyone who has knowledge of an individual who has a mental illness and is dangerous to themselves or others may fit the criteria for involuntary commitment. And if a clerk or a magistrate finds reasonable grounds to believe the facts alleged in the affidavit to be more likely than not, or to have reasonable grounds to exist that this person needs to be evaluated, the clerk or magistrate will issue an order for evaluation. So it's not an order for commitment, it's an order for evaluation. And that's something that causes a lot of confusion among especially members of the public that come down to the magistrate's office. They think, or they often think, that magistrates have the ability to commit somebody for 3 days. One thing I often hear is, can you please give them that mandatory 72-hour hold, because the last time we went through this process, they were evaluated and they were released pretty quickly. Just to be clear, magistrates don't have any authority to commit anybody for any amount of time. That is up to the commitment examiner and possibly down the road if a judge orders that. All right. Involuntary commitment language. So who is the petitioner? That is the person that is appearing before the magistrate personally and completing the affidavit. That is the person that we place under oath, swearing them to the facts. The respondent is the person that would be the subject of the commitment order. Involuntary commitment language, danger to self. How does the statute define that? Somebody that is unable to care for themselves, attempted threatened suicide, attempted engage in self-mutilation. Reasonable probability that the conduct will lead to serious physical debilitation, suicide attempt, continued self-mutilation, or predictably becomes more dangerous to self and others. Continuing on here a little bit, danger to others, inflicted, attempted, or threatened serious bodily harm, creating a substantial risk of serious bodily harm to others, engaging in extreme destruction of property, and reasonable probability of conduct being repeated. Involuntary commitment criteria. In order to demonstrate that a respondent is a danger to self or others, a petitioner must make a sworn statement of fact, not conclusions. And it does say that on the actual petition form. It does inform that you have to state facts, not conclusions. So that's helpful. That shows how the respondent is a danger to self or others. So that must be more than just they have suicidal ideations, they're bipolar, or they're an addict. So we need to hear some details. Continuing on. When is it time for an IVC? That's something that comes up pretty often in the course of a magistrate's day-to-day duties. We get a fair number of members of the public in our office on a daily basis, nightly basis, that are seeking IVCs. They don't always meet the criteria for an involuntary commitment, so during the course of a magistrate's interaction with that individual, we're going to ask them, does this person need immediate intervention? What are they doing right now that would cause the court to issue an order for law enforcement to go and pick them up? So is that person at school? Are they sitting in their classroom? Why do they need to be picked up, right here, right then? So, in addition to what they put on the affidavit and petition, it's common for the magistrate to just sort of ask some basic questions to sort of gauge the severity of the situation. And as mentioned earlier, outpatient treatment, outpatient commitment, is an option. If the magistrate doesn't feel like the person perhaps meets the criteria for an involuntary commitment order, it's, typical across the state for offices to have information about resources in the community where somebody could seek outpatient treatment. Reasonable grounds to believe. So the knowledge of facts that would lead a reasonable person of ordinary intelligence and prudence to believe the respondent probably meets the commitment criteria. So again, the magistrate is not the one making the determination if the person is going to be committed, only if there's reasonable grounds for us to issue an order for them to be evaluated. IVCs are for people that are mentally ill and or substance abusers. We probably see more in the mentally ill category versus substance abusers, or a combination of the two.
Again, we were just taking that out of North Carolina, their House committee, looking at public safety, but particularly in regards to Arena's law and how they can provide more mental health support with that new law passed in North Carolina meant to in response to that deadly attack that took place in Charlotte just months ago. You can kind of hear the conversation in which they were going, in which they can actually meet some of the requests and ask from that